It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in the summer of 1993, the kind of day that should have been ordinary. 12-year-old Sarah Anwood pedaled her bike down a sun-dappled country road, the same route she'd taken 100 times before. She'd just left Sunday school at her father's church, her backpack stuffed with crafts and Bible verses. The ride home was short, barely a mile. But somewhere between the chapel and her front door, Sarah vanished into thin air. No screams, no witnesses, just a bicycle left leaning against a tree, as if she'd stepped into another world. For years, her disappearance would haunt the quiet corners of upstate New York, until a predator's own arrogance cracked the case wide open. This is the story of a nightmare hiding in plain sight, and a family's unshakable resolve to drag the truth into the light. Asterisk. The police would later call it a perfect crime. No fingerprints, no tire tracks, just a single, terrifying question: how does a child vanish in broad daylight without a single person seeing a thing? The answer would come from an unexpected place, a botched kidnapping hundreds of miles away where another girl's quick thinking would expose a monster. But by then, it would already be too late for Sarah. This isn't just a story about a missing girl. It's about the hidden fractures in a small town's trust. It's about a man who buried his secrets as deep as he buried his victims. And it's about the relentless love of a family who turned their grief into a lifeline for others. Because some stories don't end with a body. They end with a fight. August 18, 1993 began like any other summer Sunday in the quiet town of Town Name, New York. 12-year-old Sarah Anwood, a pastor's daughter with a love for poetry and cheerleading, had spent the morning at her father's church cutting out felt Bible characters and laughing with friends. When the clock struck noon, she hugged her Sunday school teacher goodbye, strapped her crafts into her bike basket, and began the short ride home. It was a route she knew by heart, past the white picket fence of the Johnson farm, around the bend where the creek gurgled under the road, then up the hill to her family's front porch. But somewhere along those familiar 900 yards, time seemed to stop. A neighbor would later report seeing Sarah pedal past the old oak tree at 2:32 p.m., the last confirmed sighting. After that, only silence. Asterisk. By nightfall, the entire town was searching. Sheriff's deputies traced Sarah's route inch by inch while volunteers shouted her name into the woods. Then, just before midnight, a deputy's flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting in the ferns, Sarah's red Schwinn bicycle propped neatly against a tree as if waiting for her return. Nearby, buried under rotting leaves, her Sunday school projects. A meticulously drawn Noah's Ark poster. A felt dove with glue still damp. These weren't the scattered remnants of a child who'd wandered off. They'd been placed there. Hidden. The sheriff's blood ran cold. This wasn't a search anymore. It was a hunt. For months, the case grew colder than the Adirondack winters. Police chased false leads from Pennsylvania to Vermont. Psychics mailed scribbled maps to the sheriff's office. Sarah's face appeared on milk cartons and primetime crime shows, but the trail had gone stone dead. Until January 7, 1994, when a 12-year-old girl in Massachusetts outsmarted a kidnapper and a name echoed through 2 police stations at once: Louis Lent. Suddenly, detectives realized the unthinkable. Sarah hadn't been taken by a stranger passing through. Her killer had been hiding in plain sight all along. Asterisk. January 7, 1994. 5 months and 200 miles away from Sarah Wood's disappearance, another ordinary morning turned deadly. 12-year-old Rebecca was lost in her Walkman's music when a man sidled up beside her on the icy sidewalk. At first, she assumed he was just another pedestrian until she saw the glint of steel in his hand. "Don't scream," he whispered, pressing a gun into her ribs. Most children would freeze. But Rebecca had read enough Nancy Drew to know this truth: kidnappers don't take victims who draw attention. Asterisk. Her performance was worthy of an Oscar, gasping, staggering, collapsing to the pavement in an asthma attack, so convincing her abductor hesitated. That split second was all she needed. With a frantic twist, Rebecca slipped free of her backpack straps and sprinted toward a cluster of parents dropping off kids. Behind her, the would-be kidnapper made his fatal mistake. Instead of vanishing, he snatched her abandoned backpack and fled to a rusting blue pickup truck. Within hours, police were banging on the door of 43-year-old handyman Louis Lent. What they found in his home wasn't just evidence, it was a blueprint for nightmares. A crawlspace concealed under floorboards, its dirt walls reinforced with lumber. A kidnapping kit stocked with duct tape, candy laced with sedatives, and handcuffs sized for small wrists. Most chilling? A spiral notebook listing 11 girls' names, ages, and school routes. Len had been hunting for years. But Rebecca's escape had finally exposed him, and detectives in New York were already dialing Massachusetts, their hearts pounding with one terrible question: was Sarah Wood's name in that notebook? Asterisk. It started with a name, James Bernardo. 12 years old. Last seen riding his bike near a movie theater in October 1990. For 4 years, his case had gathered dust until Lent leaned forward in that interrogation room and uttered 6 words that turned cold cases red hot. I put him in the water. The confession spilled out like spoiled milk, sour and clotted with details only the killer could know. How he'd lured James with $5 to help move chairs. The exact spot in the Berkshire Mountains where he'd left the boy's body. But just as detectives began breathing easier, Len's hollow eyes locked onto theirs. There's more, he said. And with terrifying calm, he painted a new nightmare: the preacher's daughter. Sarah Wood. I buried her by the lake. Asterisk. For Sarah's parents, this should have been the beginning of the end. Instead, it became a fresh hell. Len would take them to the lake's edge, point to some indistinct patch of earth, then smirk as cadaver dogs found nothing. He'd sketch maps with deliberate errors, sending search teams into swamps while reporters asked if they were being played. And through it all, through the winter blizzards and the summer mosquitoes, through the TV specials and the vigils, Lent held onto his gruesome power move: the exact location of Sarah's grave. Even when her father, a man of God, got down on his knees in the prison visiting room and begged, Lent just stared at the ceiling. He'd given them enough to hurt, not enough to heal. The courts could only punish Lent for what they could prove. 25 years for James Bernardo's murder. But for the Woods, justice wasn't found in sentencing memos. It was in the hundreds who still showed up every August to search the lakeshore. It was in the 4,000 bikes that now roared through town each year in Sarah's memory. And it was in the quiet promise they whispered whenever Lent's name appeared in the news again: we're still here, and we're still watching. Some stories fade with time. This one grew legs. What began as a pastor's desperate plea to neighbors, "Help me find my girl," became something Lent could never have anticipated: a movement. Sarah's family turned their kitchen table into a command center, then the command center into a nonprofit that's since reunited 399 missing children. Every flyer distributed, every tip hotline answered carries the same unspoken message to predators like Lent: you took one, but you created an army. The statistics tell one story: 399 homecomings, $2.3 million raised for search teams, legislation passed in Sarah's name requiring faster Amber Alerts. But the real legacy lives in quieter moments. In the way Sarah's brother still sets an extra plate at family dinners just in case. In the battered Schwinn bicycle her father keeps leaning against the porch rail, its tires always inflated. And in the sea of spokes that rolls through town every August, growing larger each year as strangers become keepers of this memory. If you're watching this in upstate New York, maybe you remember that summer. The way the fireflies seemed brighter that August, or how your mother held your hand tighter at the bus stop. Look again at that lake you pass on your commute. Check your grandfather's hunting photos from '93, because endings aren't always neat. But they're out there, waiting in someone's attic, someone's conscience, someone's silence that's lasted 30 years too long. Press share. Press remember. And tonight, when you tuck your children in, tell them Sarah's story, not just the tragedy, but the thousands who refuse to let darkness win.